Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Anna Clements, and this is Audiobooks with Anna, where we explore the fascinating world of audiobooks with industry experts. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and welcome. This is our very first Prose Convs conversation. We're here to talk to authors about their written work and have conversations about converting to audio. Today we're joined by author Stephen Guglich and narrator Sean Pratt. Thank you very much. Sean joined us a few episodes ago to talk to us about his career. So let's find out first about Stephen. Stephen, are you a Steve or a Stephen? The first hard question of the day.
Professionally, I go by Stephen, but to my friends, they call me Steve.
I wouldn't presume. So shall I just go with Mr. Guglich?
Oh, no, Steve is fine. My students call me Mr. Guglich, and most of them actually just call me Mr. G. So that's all
perfect. Well, start us off then, Steve, with your story, if you would. Welcome to the show. How and when did you begin writing? And talk to us about this journey you're on.
Oh, thank you. Well, I have been writing for decades. I mean, I'm 54, or I'll be 54 soon, and I've always been into sci-fi, fantasy. My mind is always going. Um, if I try to go to sleep at night, I got stories running around in my head. So I'm always thinking of these stories, and I've always wanted to be an author. I originally went to school to be a film director, hoping to be able to turn my stories into films, and that didn't work out. So I kind of just dabbled a little bit, and then I met my wife, who really encouraged me to publish, to get myself published after reading my books. And she did this really, I used to send her little, for lack of a better word, morning devotionals. So like these little kind of, we used to call them words of wisdom, or wows, where she would just, wake up every morning and find them in her email box. And on our wedding night, she actually took all the wows that I wrote for her and published them into a book. And it was it really, really ignited the fire in me to publish the fantasy and sci-fi stories that I wanted. So I worked on the Veil Saga for many, many, many years. And
I must just comment, sorry, that it's actually Valentine's Day next week. So that gorgeous story has got to be retold wherever you are then.
Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, that's kind of that's the journey that I took to get to this space in my head where I thought, okay, I can do this. And then with work and family life, it took me a while, and finally I'm here. As of March 31st last year, I became a published author.
Huge congratulations. Talk
Thank
us
you.
through then your book. That's a process and a half, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, I started with the idea of, you know, when you look throughout history, there's all these amazing stories of magic and fantastical creatures and heroic heroes, and nowadays we don't see that. I mean, we see fantasy, fiction and whatnot, but back in the day, most of these people believed those stories were true. So I thought, what if, what happened to the magic? Or what if, we looked into, perhaps there really was all that magic, and somehow suddenly it all disappeared. And that's kind of where the idea of the Veil came from, in the Veil Saga, is that at one time in history, we shared the earth with elves and dwarves and gnomes and other fantastical creatures. And eventually, us humans, we got too big for our britches, and all of a sudden, the enchanted folk decided, okay, well, these guys are on a path to destruction. We need to just let them destroy themselves, and then we'll pick up after they left. And that's kind of the overarching back premise. And then in the first book, Piercing the Veil, we have the two characters who actually don't know anything about magic or anything like that. They're just ordinary people, and they without giving away any spoilers, somehow get involved in their own story where they have to pierce the veil.
Interesting. I've put the link to your website at the top of the page
Oh,
for
thank
anybody
you.
in the audience who would like to take a look. And I was busily reading, so I was curious to hear whether you're. So, obviously, we're here really to talk about your choice to convert your book to an audiobook. Was that from the off? Did you know that when you released your book, you were going to go print and ebook and audiobook?
I wanted to, not at first, of course, because I guess because this book took me almost 15 years to write, on and off. But you know, when I was first thinking about all the possibilities, I wasn't an audiobook consumer myself, so as I got busier and busier, and I had to divide my time between work, my family, writing, I found that I had less time to read, and I had a friend who encouraged me. Well, try Audible, or try audiobooks. You can just listen to your books on the way to work. You can listen to while you're cooking, mowing the lawn, whatever. And I was a little leery at first, and but I was missing reading, and I decided, all right, I'll give audiobooks a try, and man, I fell in love from the get-go, and I was a big fan of audiobooks. And then I knew that, okay, well, when I release Pierce in the Veil, I want to release it on paperback, ebook, and audiobook all at the same time. And I was hell-bent on doing that and finding the perfect narrator to tell this story.
Well, we're going to take a moment then to take advantage and introduce Sean. Thank you very much for joining us. Talk to us a minute about, I'm hoping everybody in the audience knows who you are. So I'm going to jump over that introduction and ask you, what was the first you heard of Stephen?
He was stalking me online for years, and no, no, no. He reached out to me. I seem to recall, Steve, you just sent me an email, didn't you? If I remember
Yeah, yeah.
correctly.
Well, because
And
like I said, I wanted to find the perfect narrator, and I had somebody else in mind, and I just didn't think their quality of voice was who I was looking for, and so I just decided to check out books here and there and listen to different narrators, and I came across Sean, and I was like, whoa, okay, this is the voice,
what I
the
found
person I'm
interesting
looking
was
for.
that Stephen, I'm known as the nonfiction guy. I do about 25 books a year, and maybe one or two, maybe, will be fiction. Most years it's not. But when I first started, I did tons and tons of fiction, science fiction, fantasy, detective, fiction. And it was only when I decided to really go full time as a narrator and kept pestering my clients, Books on Tape and Blackstone, for more work that they sent me nonfiction, which is where I discovered how much I enjoyed it. But what caught my attention was that Stephen had heard me do several of my earlier science fiction and fantasy pieces, although he told me I've forgotten what they were. What were they, Stephen?
I don't remember. I remember the ones that really stuck out to me because I was looking for a palate cleanser, and I decided. Well, I came across the science fiction and fantasy ones, and I really liked those. But I wanted to see how diverse you were. So what really hooked me was the westerns that you did. You did a few western books. You really showed the diversity of the voices that you could do. It's hard to find a male narrator who can do female voices well, where they don't sound like they're all falsetto and everything. And it's that bothers me as an audiobook consumer when I listen to narrators do that. And
They sound a bit like a castrati, and so so he reached out to me and he said, I've written this book and I'm interested in perhaps you narrating it. And I seem to recall you either sent me the outline, if I seem to recall, to look over, and then we scheduled a meeting to chat about it. But am I allowed to? I'm not allowed to tell the secret of the book, am I?
well, there are some really there's a big spoiler, a big reveal that comes around chapter 5 that I don't like to talk about in
Yeah.
interviews, but
Okay. So no, I know what you're talking about. So when I found the spoiler, when I was looking over the story arc and then eventually the text, my mouth fell open. I was like, "Oh, this is clever." One of the things that got me hooked on nonfiction was I was doing a lot of fiction that was sort of B-list material because I was the new guy. back, a million years ago, or as they say, as the Gen Zs say, in the late 1900s, when I was the new guy. When you do murder mysteries or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, the butler did it again, and it gets just a little, trite. And so when you have a book that has a really interesting plot twist, or, some kind of trope in it that you weren't expecting. So when he initially, he approached me, I didn't know about the twist. And I still thought, well, this will be interesting. I haven't done a fantasy piece in quite some time. And I always tell my students that the more fantastical the genre, the more liberty you can have with choosing your voices. So you just get, when you have to play an ogre, what does an ogre sound like? Or a fairy, or or a munchkin or something, as opposed to doing a sort of a straight modern romance or mystery piece. And it just gives you more chances to play around with the character voices. So I was, initially drawn in by that. But when I began to read the script, and then early on when the secret's revealed, I remember very distinctly sitting straight up in the couch going, oh, this is going to be interesting. And I was hooked. From then on, I was totally on board.
A good thing to be committed to the text that way. Stephen, what books do you listen to as an audiobook listener? And did you come across Sean as a non-fiction voice first, or was it literally just pressing all the buttons?
Well, no, unlike Sean, I am not the nonfiction guy. I don't usually listen to nonfiction. So, I was hooked on like Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author. He became I guess about 5 or 6 years ago when I started reading his books. I just was completely blown away by the level of writing and the world building that really interested me. So I listened to a lot of his books, and most of his books are narrated by Michael Kramer. And Michael Kramer does a fantastic job with those. So I was really into that. And like I said, he would have been at the time he would have been my first choice because I just love the way Michael Kramer narrates books. But the quality of Michael Kramer's voice, he's got this sort of grizzled, deeper voice, and the main character in the Veil Saga is a guy named Jeremy, and he's your sort of average, ordinary guy who he's a school teacher. He's got a friendly sort of voice, and I'm sure Kramer could have pulled it off, but I wanted to find um you know Michael Kramer is Brandon Sanderson's guy. I wanted to find my guy. So uh I that's why I started looking around. So I looked at authors like or not authors, narrators like Nick Padell. I thought I had considered for a while, and a few others. And honestly, I don't know how I first came across. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did. I told you earlier. Yeah, I was just looking for a palate cleanser because I've been reading so much fantasy, and I wanted to get into some westerns, and that's how I found Sean's book. That I don't even remember which ones because I know he did a few. Sean's voice, and then I saw that he also did some fantasy books as well, and that's what kind of hooked me on Sean.
I'm curious about the process in and of itself. Is there anything that surprised you about the process? Was it as straightforward as you hoped it might be, or did you know what you were getting yourself into?
Well, Sean was just awesome to work with. He walked me through every step of the way, kind of told me what I needed to do. I think the thing that surprised me most was the homework that Sean gave me. Yeah, he told me that I had to record every single pronunciation of all the great weird fantasy names that I came up with, and that what I wasn't suspecting. I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't have time to sit here for a day and go through all this stuff. But I appreciated it because I appreciated the effort that Sean put into that to get to know my world building. He wanted to know exactly how I produced some of them. Strangely enough, though, I did a Kickstarter for the book, and before Sean asked me to do that, I asked him to do a couple of, or actually, it was his idea. He's the one who convinced me to do the Kickstarter, and he said he would do a couple of samples for the book, and he read it cold without me kind of giving any direction or anything. And it was interesting to see how he pronounced some of the names, and I really liked the way he pronounced some of them, so I changed it based on the way he pronounced. Like there was one creature called a Koth in my original idea, and he pronounced it Koth, and I like the way that sound. And then one of the villains was named Borbash, and he called him Borash, and didn't pronounce the B in there. And I'm like, oh, I like the sound of that too. So I changed those things based on those samples. And then when it came time for me to do all that homework he gave me to do to make sure that he was capturing it the way that I wanted. I think that was the most surprising, but most appreciated as
And
well.
very
So,
fortuitous. It sounds fabulous. Back
yeah.
up a second and talk to us then, because there are people who'll be listening to the replay of this who, as authors, are curious about what you mean by a Kickstarter and why you needed one. Talk us through that process.
Well, producing a book, especially if you're trying to produce it in as many formats as possible, is rather expensive. And I was talking to Sean about how do authors afford to do audiobooks, and he said check out GoFundMe, check out Kickstarter, and do all that. So I started to do the research, and I saw that there were other authors on there who were doing it. Who are doing Kickstarters for their just to publish their book. Some were doing it for audiobooks, and I figured, based on the research that I did, it turned out to be a really good pre-sale event for me, and that's the way I kind of marketed the Kickstarter. Was you get to order the book ahead of time, and you get a couple of extra perks with the few things that I threw in by ordering it ahead of time. And man, was it a successful Kickstarter! I was blown away. It was I don't know what I was expecting from the Kickstarter, but I didn't expect it to do as well as it did. And just the amount of people that saw it. And I had people from Australia and Germany and who I don't even know, and buying the book. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, now I got to ship books to Australia. I didn't know I wasn't expecting that kind of stuff. But it was a really good opportunity, and it was it was a great event to get my name out there, the book out there, and it was super successful. I remember the day we launched. It was November 1st of 2022, and it was a Tuesday. And I figured, I didn't take the day off of work or anything, because I just thought, okay, it'll play itself out. It'll take a couple of days to get fully funded, that what we were looking for. And so I went to work, and I'm doing my normal rounds as a principal. Um, and I don't get to check my phone very much, so I decided to take a break around lunchtime, and my phone is just blowing up. My wife is texting me, "Where are you? Are you watching this? Are you looking at this? Where are?" I had about 12 different texts from her, and I go to look at the Kickstarter, and we were fully funded in 20 minutes. I was shocked how successful it was. It was so cool. Just an awesome experience. I totally recommend that every independent author do it, because it's a great way to get out there and just get your book out there.
So for you narrators who are listening to this, if you're negotiating with the author and you're trying to make sure that you can get your fee, the first step is to suggest doing exactly what Stephen outlined, some kind of Kickstarter, Patreon, GoFundMe kind of campaign that the author would have to, set up the program for, and you can help promote it online. Then what we're really doing from our perspective is doing audio samples. You could do video samples, like TikTok worthy things. And even, if they want, if the author, like send out, like I said, signed copies or so on. But you could, if you want to get involved in it, I suggest that if you can add anything onto that, maybe you sign the copies of the book if they're interested. You can be creative here. But the main thing is to let them know that this is a really viable way to raise that money. And it also raises the visibility of the project. It gets excitement going on around the whole thing. And then there's one other bonus for at least the American authors, is that depending on how the writer has set up their writing career, like an LLC or an S corp or whatever, they can write the cost of the audiobook production off on their taxes, because the IRS views the audiobook as a promotional tool for the book. No different than when Stephen, paid a web designer to build a website, or if he hired a publicist, or he hired a photographer for a photo shoot. All those things get back to the initial trademarked or copyrighted material, which is the book. And so not only did Steve raise the money, I don't necessarily follow Stevenson's tax returns, but maybe you want to speak to that, Stephen, to say, were you able to make that happen with your finances on the back end?
Well, we should probably have my wife on the podcast for that because she handles all that stuff. But yes, yeah, most definitely. Yeah, we've learned from Sean as well as a few other people who have told us, what we can and what we can't write off, and it's worked out really well in that sense. I mean, as far as like like when we did our 2023 taxes, we were able to do all that write off, the cost of the Kickstarter and all that stuff. So, and then of course the production of the book, which would be this year. My wife was just talking to me about all itemization she has to do for the taxes and stuff this year, but she thinks it's going to be totally worth it, she said.
That's excellent news. And of course, that idea of the extra things that you give away. I know that I did a Kickstarter with an author whereby the people who donated some money got their name listed in the credits at the end of the book. And I think it's interesting sometimes to go through the Kickstarters and see what different things authors are giving away or how they're using the opportunity to get people excited about the book. Stephen, was this before you had actually released the book? So did these count as people who would want pre-orders of your book, or had you already released the book before you started organizing the audio?
No, I had it in my mind. I'm most of what I do, I want to try to do it as professionally as possible. And I noticed that professional authors, who are traditionally published, they when they do a release, they release all three at the same time, and I that was what I wanted to do, and I thought that would give. And when I say all three, I mean the ebook, the paperback, and the audiobook all at the same time. And I wanted that sort of event in there. So when we set up the Kickstarter, we decided to go ahead and market it as pre-sales, and that was pretty much all the email marketing that I did. The Facebook marketing was, pre-order now, get your pre-order now and get your Kickstarter perks with the book. And that's how we did it. And that was also the only way we released hardbacks too. I don't sell hardbacks anywhere. That was the only way to get a hardback or Piercing the Veil was through the Kickstarter. And I was surprised at how many people want hardbacks.
It is quite fascinating, actually, book wise at the moment. They're still very, very popular, considering, we're all worried about all sorts of other things taking over. People are still keen to have like the original, the real deal, as it were. That's very cool to know, too. We had a couple of questions come in from some other people, one of which was, did the recording process impact your writing process for the next book? Is there anything that you found in the whole? I mean, you talked about the fortuitous name changes because of Sean's choice of pronunciation. Did you change? Are you writing a next book? Is there a sequel?
Oh yes, there's definitely a sequel. I'm feverishly writing away at it as we speak. Well, not as we speak right now, but I mean, just before we got on, I was doing some writing. Yes, it is. I guess that's kind of a hard question to answer because I guess the way my mind works and being an audiobook consumer, I I keep in mind of what it's going to sound like anyway, when I'm writing. So I kind of write so that if a spelling, if you have words that sound the same and but may not translate well if you're in the audio, I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but I try to stay away from stuff like that when I'm writing anyway, so that when it is in the audiobook form, people get the story as well as they can without having to think about, oh, what did the narrator just say there. And I've noticed that as an audiobook consumer a few times. Of course I can't think of any examples where they'll say something and I'm like, oh, did they mean this or did they mean that? And I just, I try to avoid that in my
Yeah,
writing because that is my intended purpose, is to have all my books out on audio as well.
wonderful. Sorry, I was distracted by the chat. Rebecca has written, going back to the Kickstarter, she says, so when someone donates to the Kickstarter, are they paying more than they normally would for the book, like a donation, or is it just the amount they would already be paying? How did you set it up, Stephen?
That's a great question, and that was one of the things that I learned a lot, because I didn't actually I estimated, did a lot of research to figure out, how much is it going to cost and per book and all that, and my estimations were wrong. So according to the recommended, so the my book is 614 pages, and according to what Ingram and other expert sites recommend, it should retail for 24.95 is what is what the suggested price was. So I wanted to give, um and I thought, oh, that seems really high for a book, especially for an author you don't know. So I figured, okay, that's just only the suggested price. I'll go ahead and when it comes out, I'll sell it for 19.99 or whatever. But at the time, I hadn't had the final format done, so nothing was uploaded to Ingram, nothing was uploaded to Amazon, and I didn't know what the final cost was going to be. And I was surprised to see how much it would cost to actually print a book. And you get a discount for ordering in bulk, but like on Amazon, you don't order in bulk. Through Ingram, you would order in bulk. So I on the Kickstarter, I was doing the paperbacks for that price, for the $20, but I wouldn't have made as much of a profit. So it cost me $12 to publish, or to print each book. So in order to make a 50% profit, I do have to sell it for the suggested price that they wanted. So in a sense, I did lose a little bit of money there, but obviously I still made money, because it's not the 19.99 for the book is not bad. When it costs $12 to produce, and then why they're also getting extra little perks. Like I did these special gold foil bookmarks that were really cool. So those cost about $1 to produce. So they got that, and that was the only place to get that. So it is the way the different tiers are set up. I know, like Rebecca was asking, is it like a donation? It can be a donation because you can have a lower level tier, that I see on most sites, most Kickstarters, where don't want the product, but you want to just support the author or the inventor, and you can make a donation at any level. But if you want certain products, like if you want the ebook, that usually comes in at $5 or $10. If you want the audiobook, most of the time I see the audiobooks are only going for about, most people sell their audiobooks for only about $15, which I thought was surprising, when it comes to Kickstarters. But there, once you pay your narrator, you get some of the profit, depending on how you're distributing. And that was a big thing, a big learning curve too, is learning how to distribute the audiobook. So there's a lot that goes into it. I think we could probably do a whole podcast on Rebecca's question.
Absolutely, I think you're right. And I think you were, I don't want to say lucky, but you did well to get Sean on board, because a lot of authors struggle with what the distribution means, how it works, where the best place is to go. And to have a narrator who can walk you through that and help you with it makes a huge difference, and like you say, it is a very large learning curve for so many people. Are you pleased with how sales have worked out in the different formats? You mentioned that somebody still wants hardback, so it's great that you offer that. Has it worked out like you thought it might?
Well, um, I, I'm sure you guys are aware of the whole thing that Brandon Sanderson brought against Audible, where he has been boycotting Audible because of their low payout to authors.
Not
Uh,
unlike Taylor Swift removing her music from Spotify. I think he can
yeah,
afford to, can't he? That's the
exactly, and that's the thing. I mean, for someone like Brandon Sanderson, yeah, he can afford to boycott Audible. I can't, so I got to take what I can get, even though, um, there's too many options out there, honestly. So if you go with Find Away Voices, they give you the best money back as an author. I get about 80% of the sales, but you don't have as many people buying from those places like Spotify or the other places that Audible or that Find Away Voices distributes to. So by not going Audible exclusive, I'm only getting 25% of sales. Whereas if I went Audible exclusive, I'd still only get 40% of sales. So it's a learning curve. I thought, well, hey, 80% of sales is really good. So I'll go what they call going wide, where you distribute in every possible market, and you could do that. But again, the market that everybody goes to, or a big majority of the people go to, is Audible. So I'm losing. I sold most of my books on Audible, but I don't have as, I'm not making as much a profit on those Audible books as I would if somebody went to Spotify and bought the book, or one of the other places that Find Away Voices distributes to.
It's a dilemma, isn't it? And I think it's as time goes by and you bring more books out, it'll help you work out what you want to do next and to calculate those sales over time. Because I know a lot of the authors I work with that work in sapphic fiction, for example, that sell really well in Holland and Germany. Of course, if you go exclusive, then you're not actually selling to the European market. So you have to almost know where your fans are, where the people who are supporting you are. The guy in Australia wouldn't have been able to buy your book if it wasn't elsewhere. It's a weird kind of dichotomy to be in, whereby you have to work out in advance of seeing the results, work out what's going to be best for you. So that must be very difficult.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, it is, and I think a couple of books down the road, I might change my process, but I'm still kind of firm sticking with the going wide method, where I distribute on all these avenues, and give everybody everybody all over the world has a chance to purchase the book from whatever format they want to. Sure, I don't make quite as much, but hey, it's my first book.
Yeah.
I don't expect to make to become a bestseller right away on an independent author's
Well,
budget.
you may
So,
yet, Steve.
well, I'm hoping to. I mean, I'm hoping to, but I mean, on the budget, as far as being able to promote, and there's so much out there. There's so much opportunity out there to get your book seen or heard, but the problem is everybody wants money. I get emails from people all the time asking me, I'll review your book if you pay me so much. I'm like, I'm not paying you to review my book. You're either going to read it or you're not, and if you don't like it, then don't leave a review, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. But I mean, I think that's paying for reviews is not a good practice.
It's a slippery slope, isn't it? It's not a good road to go down. And I think the trouble is you don't know what you don't know until you do. So it's
Right.
it's a difficult, well done you
That's true.
for storming ahead and hoping for the best. A couple of questions I wanted to ask about your profile on Audible. It says you and your wife launched Your Wildest Dreams Publishing LLC, which I just adore the name of. And it says to fulfill a dream born in the imagination of Stephen's dad, Stanley. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's really bittersweet. My dad was, before my wife came along, my dad was my muse. He was a big fantasy and sci-fi fan. He took me to Star Wars when I was 6 years old, and I saw it on the big screen for the first time. It was, just an experience I'll never forget, and just the stories my dad would tell. Like I said, he was my muse, and his dream was to have a publishing company called Your Wildest Dreams Publishing, and he wanted to produce books and all sorts of stuff. And he never finished a book. I have a lot of his old manuscripts that he started, and I do intend to finish them and publish them one day. But he called it Your Wildest Dreams Publishing as we were growing up, and just as a side thing for him. And so we decided, well, we were going to make it official. I even took an old logo that my dad had designed for the company and had it redone and kind of updated and used that as our logo. And my dad, we launched the book. The official launch of the book was on March 31st of 2023, which would have been my dad's 83rd birthday. He passed away a few years back, so he never actually got to see any of my books either. So, but if it wasn't for him, there wouldn't be any books anyway.
Oh, that's wonderful. And going back to Dana, who'd very kindly sent in a couple of questions ahead of time, she was curious about having seen on your profile that she noted you were Principal of the Year 2 years ago, 2020 North Dakota Principal of the Year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
She wondered how much were you involved with the recording of the audiobook and how much did it impact your work? Nobody from school is listening, so you're okay.
Well, that's always the challenge. The hard thing is the compartmentalize. When you have a family, when you have a career, and then you have a hobby that you want to become a career. It's finding the time to do everything without neglecting anything else. And so when I was at work, I was at work. I invested in the students and the teachers, and a lot of times I had to put other things to the side in order to make that happen. And my philosophy with working with students and teachers is always, is being a servant leader to them. So I'm there to help whenever they need me. And I think that's why I was as noticed as much as I did to become the principal of the year for 2020. Is that they saw the things that we were doing at our school, and how we were making a difference. And that was very much noted by my peers, and that's how I was able to be nominated for that. I think that it might answer the question. I hope.
Yes, yes. No, no, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. A couple of things. Rebecca says, you figured out how to use Club Deck on your first Clubhouse event. Are you from the future? so, so props to you. Mary Phillips is asking, are you selling your book direct from your website because you chose to go wide and you have the option to do so?
Yeah, not yet. I do plan on doing that eventually. That's a whole nother setup. I looked into it, how that's done. Thankfully, Ingram Spark just made it even easier for you to do that because they allow you to set up a direct link. So eventually, I might be doing that, but that's just one more thing that I have to invest in time to build and get set up. And then if we sell the books, then we have to mail them out, and either my wife or I has to take a trip um, to the store to mail them. Thankfully, now with Ingram Spark, you don't have to actually do that. But if people want, most of the time, I notice though that if people want to buy directly from you, they want your autograph. So you can't do that with Ingram Spark. You can do a digital sign page, but I as a book collector myself, that wouldn't be the same thing as having someone sign it in fresh ink. So I haven't gotten there yet. I do plan on eventually doing direct sales.
It sounds like you have a lot on your plate, full stop. So well
Yeah.
done you for getting this far.
Well, yeah, and that would be easy with the paperback, but as far as direct sales for the audiobook, that would be even harder because the only direct sales method that I would know is through a service called BookFunnel. And then again, now if people get the book, the buy it directly from you through BookFunnel, then they have to have the BookFunnel app, and people are comfortable. They want all their books in one place. So, you have I'm an Audible person. I want all my books on Audible. I don't want to go from Spotify to Audible to BookFunnel, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, absolutely. The people want what they want.
yes.
And you also got a question from Chris Rossetti, who says, was Your Wildest Dreams in any way a reference to a Moody Blues
I was a fan of that song back in the day, but my dad, I that's a good question. I never got the chance to ask my dad where he got the idea of Your Wildest Dreams from. I don't think it was from the song, but I like the song.
We've got another question in from Regina. It says, you spoke about how you heard the book as you were considering narrators. Obviously, you chose a very accomplished and award-winning narrator in Sean. Would you have considered a newer narrator? If so, why? And if not, why not?
I would have. I was looking for the right voice. I really, that's what was stuck on me. In my head, I had what Jeremy's voice sounded like, and and that's what I was stuck on. So I probably would have, if if I found somebody who was, I hadn't heard of Sean Pratt before I started looking for books, and then when I was listening to that Western book, I was like, oh, this guy's interesting. And then he was actually doing it under his pseudonym, Lloyd James. And then I found out that Lloyd James and Sean Pratt were the same person. And then I started to look more and more, and I was like, wow, man, Sean's got a lot of books out.
That's an understatement.
But yeah,
Uh,
I would consider somebody who a new person, if it really depends on how good they are, because I'm a perfectionist. I really I look for high quality. I try to do everything high quality. When I was producing the actual book itself, the paperback, I wanted people to look at the book, and I wanted it comparable to anything you'd find from a traditionally published publishing house. So
yeah,
that's kind of where
no,
my perfectionism comes in.
absolutely, and you chose well. We are very pleased with your choice. I've again put a link to the top of the page to Steve's website, which allows you then to follow either to sales of the book or to the audiobook as you choose, if you'd like to so indulge. Coming back to you, Sean, what was the process of? I'm assuming it was a straightforward process of audiobook narration, in as much as you had to pre-read and so on. But you talked about having helped Stephen with the Kickstarter, the process itself of narration. Let's pretend Stephen's not listening. Did you enjoy it?
Yes, I did. I had a wonderful time. I was because it was so well written. I had a lot of really fun characters, and this is once again for the narrators in the audience. This is why it's important to talk with the author. Originally, Stephen gave me a character breakdown of who these different characters were. This was before I made him record the pronunciations, which I always say is a very smart thing to do, because now the author's on record having said the words, so now you know exactly what they want. But the uh, there were certain characters that grabbed my attention, but in Steve's initial breakdown, um, he he said, I want to say it was um, Steve. He said that the fairies or the elves had an Israeli accent, and it was like when we had our first meeting, I said, "Okay, we need to have a serious talk, because if we go this route, all the elves are going to sound like old Jewish men from Queens, like from when I used to live in New York." I said we got to go with something different, and fortunately, having by this time read the book, I suggested, like, can we do like a sort of a light British kind of accent, because these characters seem the most sophisticated of all the other world races, as it were. And so one of our lead elves is I modeled his voice after Errol Flynn, and um, and then our bad guy I made after James Spader from The Blacklist. Um, I was struggling with his voice, and for those narrators out there, I think you know what I'm talking about. You have a really well written character, and you're going, but what do they sound like? What do they sound like? Because there's always a melding between your experience as a narrator and the words on the page that the authors put down. You're trying to find a way to make them really come off the page, and so they won't sound stilted. And we were talking about it, and it was Stephen who told me. He said, "Well, I sort of modeled the bad guy on James Spader, and then it just clicked, and it just made perfect sense. All the lines just sort of rolled out, one after the other from that moment on." Um, and yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm very excited about the second book. I know he's working on it, and I every so often send him little emojis of people cracking a whip so he'll get it done, so we can get started on it. But yeah, I'm very intrigued where the story is going to go. But yeah, once I did my research, and once I settled in. Now I did one other trick, which for the narrators in the audience that might be helpful. Oftentimes, when you start a piece of fiction, especially if you have really distinct voices, sometimes when you have to start the narration process, you may not have locked in the voice just yet. When you start narrating, get going on it. But usually around chapter 3 or 4, the voices begin to settle, and you really begin to inhabit the characters. So what I'll do is I'll work my way through the piece, and then at some point, maybe by the end of the book, but sometimes even before, once I know I really have the voices, I'll go back and re-record the opening, 3 or 4 chapters, because now I've lived with the story, I've lived with the sort of the tempo of the piece, and definitely settled into the voices of the characters. So this way, from the listener's perspective, there's no sort of warm up time as you, the narrator, get into the different characters. You've gone back and re recorded them. So that was something I did for this piece, and I know I'll do it again for book two. But we want to talk about, Stephen, is the ongoing promotion for the book, because once the book was out, we didn't stop. Stephen lined up a couple of podcasts for us to be on, and also I told him about the Voice Arts Awards, and he sent it in for a nomination, and damned if we didn't get the nomination. I was absolutely flabbergasted. When I told him about the award show, he was very excited, but I tried to lower expectations. I said, in the fantasy category, they're going to get a whole lot of submissions. But then I was teaching in the middle of it, when the announcement came out, and suddenly my phone blew up with people, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And it was that we had pulled the nomination, and I feel really happy about that for Stephen. That I think it'll, that's going to help with sales and future promotion, and hopefully getting us on more interview shows or podcasts or webcasts to help promote the book and the series.
Wonderful. Chris, thank you very much for joining us.
Quick question. Stephen, have you ever considered, or would you ever consider, doing a voice cameo appearance in one of your writings? Thank you so much.
Yes, I've been quite encouraged. I've been encouraged by quite a few people to do that, especially with some of the short stories. I'm not sure if how comfortable I am with that, because I've heard other authors who have narrated their books, and it's just a disaster. I know there's more to it than acting, and more to it than just reading. And Sean's taught me a lot of that as well as we've gone on. And anytime I hear an author say, "Oh yeah, I'm just going to narrate my own book," I'm like, "No, please don't. Please consider, consider that before you do that." But yeah, I might try my hand at it. I do have a short story that I wrote, and as part of the Kickstarter, actually, that's where that idea came from. Part of the Kickstarter was that a lot of people were like, "If you're gonna do an audiobook, would you narrate it?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. Well, what about a short story?" So that was one of the stretch goals, was that I would narrate a short story, and I still haven't gotten around to it. I've told my Kickstarter people that I will get to it. I'll get that out to them. I'm hoping to maybe sit down in a mic and do that during spring break. I might call Sean and ask him for some tips and help with a German accent. But other than that, I think, hey, I can't do too much damage with a short story.
We hope. You've actually, I jest because in the chat, people are saying that you do have a good voice. And then Dana said, just imagine that you're leading a staff meeting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I do have a little bit of an acting background myself. I mean, I've been in theater. I've done some television shows. We have one of the projects that we do, and this is one of the other reasons why I was nominated for and received the award for the Principal of the Year. Is we started a media arts program at our school, the only one in North Dakota, and I got a grant several years in a row to produce short films with the students, where we actually bring in a film crew, and every year we produce a short film that is written by the students, and most of the post production is done by the students, and then they help with the actual production themselves, and that's become a very, very cool program. And then the kids always ask me to be involved in it. I started out as a facilitator, and then they're like, "Well, what about you, Mr. G? Can you do a character?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'll do a character." And one year we actually did, one of the students, when they did their pitch, the things that the students have to do as part of the media arts program is they have to write a pitch. And one of the students pitched a parody of how the Grinch stole Christmas, and they did it as how Mr. Guglich stole Christmas. So I actually got to star in that short film, and that was a lot of fun.
Maybe we can see an EGOT in your future. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming up, Chris. Huge thanks to you both for spending this time with us. Stephen, is there anything I didn't ask you that you'd like to mention that I should have done?
No, I think it was great. Thanks for all the questions, and I just want to encourage anybody who, if you have any thoughts, comments, questions, please feel free to email me or contact me. One of my passions is helping people who have the same dream that I did to realize their dreams. I have a project that I'm working on for that called the Shared World Project, which is working with young writers to write short stories and then produce an anthology for these young writers, just so they can say, I'm a published writer.
What a great opportunity for them. That's fantastic, Steve. Rosemary is listening to the book as we speak, is partway through it, and so she's greatly enjoying it. And she's keen for you to come back and do that podcast about the Kickstarter from start to finish. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Today we talked to author Steve Guglich and narrator Sean Pratt. My takeaways: Piercing the Veil sounds like a great read and a great listen. Do go check it out. The link is at the top of the page. Thank you very much to everybody who joined us today. Thank you very much to you all. Do make sure you have a wonderful week, everybody, and let's go out and be our favourite selves. Take care.